Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and this is a preview of Theme Park Mania. That's right, this is a preview of Theme Park Mania. I am Professor Meg, and welcome back to the Board Game Co channel. Theme Park Mania is brought to you by Meeple Master, and this is a paid preview, so please keep that in mind, and all components are subject to change. This is a prototype copy, however, this will give you a great visual on how the game should play, and I think that it is a great representation, but keep in mind that some things could change in the future. In Theme Park Mania, players are going to be working together in a shared park area, vying for rides, facilities, and trying to charge as much as they can for other players to be able to visit their rides. To do so, players are going to be building out these roads, which will be a shared road area for all players. Every time you build a road, you gain a coin, and roads are one of the main actions in the game. So when you start, you'll be building roads and train tracks. There are also train tracks that go around the board, and you're able to use the trains to get from one area to another if you need to jump from one spot that's very far from the other side of the board. So as you're placing out both of these train tracks and these roads, you'll be gaining dollars, and then you'll be using those dollars to eventually build rides. Now, rides will always cost you $4 to be able to build, and then you'll be able to see what it is. This is Pirate Treasure. Now you can see that it is a pirate type of ride. So over here, if we have a pirate type available to purchase, which we actually do, if we have an additional $2, we can buy this facility to go along with it. If we only had $1, we could buy a regular facility. However, these ones aren't very helpful because they're just decoration. That's not true for all of the facilities, but just these particular ones. I'll get into that in a second. But if you have one that is matching, you will gain money when your ride is visited, and you'll get victory points at the end of the game. Now that is jumping ahead a little bit on us, so let's get into a few other things that you'll be able to do. Players are going to be building roads, building out their rides with their facilities, but after that, the rides are going to need to be visited. So at the beginning of the game, everyone is going to start with their meeple at the entrance of the park, and then you'll be moving this meeple around to visit the different attractions. Now to do this, you'll be playing a move card from your hand. These are secret, I want to show you guys later, but these are move cards. So players will start with all move cards. There are other action cards in the game that I'll go over to in a second, but these are what your action cards will look like. Oh, I'm sorry, your movement cards. And so, for example, if I played this, let's see, if I played a 5, I would be able to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm at the entrance to this ride. However, I'm not quite yet able to go in it because I didn't play enough movement. If I had played a 7 instead, I would have been able to go into this ride and visit it. Now, when you visit a ride, you get the amount that the person would pay to enter the park. So all of these little mini meeples are going to be dropped off at the different rides, and they'll be paying to enter the park, and the price is determined by how many rides are currently available. It's one of those things where the place is more exciting the more rides there are, so it's more expensive to go to, which is very thematic with games like this. But you'll basically be earning money for your people going to the ride, and then the owner of the ride, so in this case Blue, would make $2, $3, $4. Now where Blue placed themselves, there just wouldn't be a transfer of money there. However, if this instead had been owned by the red player would be paid $4 by the blue player to be able to visit this spot. Now there are a few other actions that you can take, and especially toward the beginning of the game, you're going to be wanting to hire workers. You need people to work at your park to be able to run basically everything. So there are 4 types of people that you have that you need to hire. You need to hire a mechanic to be able to even build rides. Then you need an operator to be able to have people visit your rides and operate it. There are 2 optional roles after that. There's the mascot and the security officer. Now, those ones are optional, but if you have them, there are different action cards that will come up that will trigger those different roles. So for example, when a card like this comes up, it has a lightning bolt symbol. That means that it instantly happens, and it says mascot selfie. Guest wants to take a selfie with your mascot. If you have a mascot, keep this card as a victory point. So this card would be a victory point at the end of the game, which, especially in a 2-player game, it's a very tight game that one victory point could make or break it for you. But you could only keep this if you had the mascot. Now, there are other cards that can cause you to lose people. For example, this is an instant that can happen that is Fire Mechanic. Your mechanic has caused an explosion. Fire your mechanic and remove this card from the deck. So you have to remove your mechanic and then pay to hire a new one. Now, all of the employees will cost the same amount to hire, and this is determined by how many rides are currently available. So in the beginning, they'll only cost 2, and then they can cost all the way up to $5 to be able to hire them. So if something like this happens to you later in the game, especially your mechanic, I mean, that would be to build the rides, so if all of your rides are built, it's not the worst, but you do also get points in Endgame Scoring for having each of your operators, or not operators because that's one of the roles, but each of your employees, you can get a point for each employee, and then if you have all 4, you also get a point at the end as well. So let's talk a little bit more about the pace of play and what this would look like so that you can kind of see how Endgame Scoring would work. Now, the pace of play has you trying to move as strategically as possible around the board. There are going to be 2 different types of places for you to visit, both yours and your opponents. Yours won't cost you anything to go to, and your opponents will get more and more expensive the more facilities that they decide to add to their areas. For example, this one would be $3, but then if they add another food stand, it's $4, and oh goodness, they could also add a bathroom to it for another $1. So now, all of a sudden, to be able to go to Jungle Adventure, I need to be paying $5. So you do want to be strategic and try to go to your opponent's rides first. However, you want to be as strategic as possible and make sure that you can also go as quickly as you can around the park. Because another thing is those movement cards, and there are these yellow spaces on some of the movement spots. Now what that means is that if I was the red meeple, and if I played a 2 movement card and ended here, I can play another movement card from my hand. So as long as you land on a spot with the yellow card on the symbol on the tile, you get to play a second card. Now when I was playing, I was even able to chain 3 and 4 movements sometimes to really get somewhere that I needed to. That was happening more toward the end of the game, but you can really use those spots to kind of boost yourself around the park, which I thought was very fun. Now the game can be set for either 12 or 16 rides, and that will determine how many meeples you need to visit all of the rides, because the first person to visit every single ride that has been built and in the park will trigger the end game. So these fun little buses that are in the beginning player board, they have your stack of meeples, which is a really great visual so that you can see how many meeples your opponent has left. Again, it was kind of head-to-head where it was a bit tied and generally, within 1 or 2 of each other, but it's a really great visual that I appreciate how this is presented, just to be able to see who's ahead and who you need to try to be beating. Now there are a few other things that make the paths a little bit tricky. There's some of those actions that can come up. So this is a malfunction. When a malfunction goes on a ride, it can no longer be visited. So no one can go to visit it, it's no longer working, and the owner of the ride needs to pay $1 to move it to a different ride. There are a few other cards that will get rid of it, but that is the main way, is paying $1 to move it to a different ride instead. There's also a sinkhole, which is very similar, but it's for roads. So it means that, there's a sinkhole in the road and you can't keep going. If you pay $1, you can move it to a new junction, and then there's a sinkhole there instead. I have never seen a sinkhole at a theme park, and I think that would be quite terrifying. Alright, and that is generally everything that you'll be doing in the game. The final action that I didn't go over is that you can buy facilities on their own. So every time that you build a park, you get 1 facility. However, you can buy 2 facilities on their own as a turn, especially if there's one that matches your place. Because as a reminder, they have certain symbols, and if it matches the one that you own at the end of the game, they're all worth a victory point. So that being said, let's go over endgame scoring and the different things that you get points for, because I think that will give you a good idea of what you need to do in the game, and this board is actually set up to help you with that a lot. Alright, and first things first is you'll score for the total meeples that are out on the board. You can have 1 meeple per ride, so the person who triggered endgame should have either 12 or 16 mini meeples out, depending on how many rides you're playing with. And then after that, everyone will score 1 point for each of their meeples that are out on a ride. You'll also get a point for every ride that you've built. You'll get an additional point for everything that matches the theme. I know I had some that matched somewhere. Here we go. So we have the Arctic slide as this little snowflake. And this food place has a matching snowflake, so this would be worth 1 victory point as well. And then you also get a victory point for every ride area that is completed. So for example, this Enchanted Castle is completely surrounded in by other tiles, so you'd get a victory point for that as well. After that, as I said, you'll get a point for every team member that you have. They have to be with you currently, so if they did get fired, they don't count, unfortunately. But if you have all of your team members, you get an additional point as well. And finally, you get a point if your station is connected to the board. So you would get a point for that as well. And then any other victory point. One final thing in scoring is that every $10 that you have left over is worth 1 victory point. Now, money will be coming and going the entire game. You'll be gaining money for building roads and tracks and then spending it to build your own rides. You'll be gaining it as you start placing your little mini Meeples because they're all entering into the park. You'll be spending money to visit other rides, but making money when people visit your rides, and saving money when you visit your own rides. So money was constantly coming and going throughout the entire game. I was very surprised by how little I had sometimes and then how much I made other times, but it's kind of a pace of how much the other players are visiting your rides and when they choose to do it, whether they're doing it early game or late game. But it can kind of turn the tides and make you think you might be winning or losing, and then all of a sudden you can come up pretty rich at the end. This has been a preview of Theme Park Mania. It's for 2 to 4 players, and it will run you around a half an hour per player. It is a pretty quick, fast-paced tile laying game where you're trying to optimize your scores and balance where you're placing things, and also trying to rush your own meeple all around the board to visit the rides as much as possible. It definitely played very fast-paced. There are only the 5 different actions to choose from, and it is a bit thinky where you're placing things, as games like this tend to be. But it wasn't too tough. That I felt it was very intuitive, and a lot of the rules were very clear and made a lot of sense. So that has been Theme Park Mania. If you have any questions, leave them down below, and I hope you check out their crowdfunding campaign. I'm Professor Meg, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.